So I'm just going to introduce our moderator so that he can introduce our guest. So moderating, we have Logan Jastrzemski, co-founder and partner at Frictionless Capital, and a swimmer, I believe. And a swimmer. We have our beloved Professor Tse rejoining us to moderate another panel. I'll let him introduce his panelists.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We are here at the last panel of the day for all those brave enough to stick around for another 45 minutes of Bitcoin. We've got a great panel. If the last panel was more on the cultural adoption side, I'm going to try to take this panel in a more technical builder direction. We've got some amazing people up here to talk about the things that are actually happening in the Bitcoin ecosystem, which have maybe been flying underneath the radar. Hopefully we can unpack those a little bit today. But to start off, I will turn it over to each of our panelists to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about how they are involved in the Bitcoin ecosystem.
Cool. Hey, I'm David Shea. I'm the co-founder of Babylon. So the goal of Babylon is to take this great resource that we have, Bitcoin, and use it in a good way for the rest of the world. So my first exposure to blockchain is actually reading Nakamoto's white paper, the most amazing paper I've ever read.
Beautiful.
That's it. Should I say more? Need I say more?
All right, and Danny, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Danny Liang. I'm founder of Metagood and also On-Chain Monkey. And I was a student at Stanford many years ago actually before this building was built. I got my PhD in computer science here. And then I also founded a Stanford Bitcoin meetup back in 2013 to build community around Bitcoin here at Stanford. I also founded the largest cryptocurrency exchange in Taiwan called MyCoin, and another blockchain analytics company that was sold in 2018. And now I'm focused fully on Ordinals.
I'm Erin Redwing. I'm actually a current PhD student at Berkeley, so I feel a little bit weird being here right now.
We welcome you. We welcome you.
But yeah, my PhD's in planetary science, totally not related to blockchain. But I got obsessed with Bitcoin a couple years ago and ended up going to meetups to meet other people because my friends and family got sick of me talking about Bitcoin nonstop. And Casey Rodemore was the first person that I spoke to at a Bitcoin meetup who created Ordinals. And so for the last year and a half, I've just been on this kind of crazy Ordinals journey. And now we've just recently launched a nonprofit to fund the open source development. So I am president of the nonprofit, which is called the Open Ordinals Institute. And yeah, it's been a wild ride. It's really exciting to see what's been happening with Ordinals and Bitcoin in general. So yeah, looking forward to the panel.
All right. Hi, my name is Albert. I'm the CEO and founder of Bitcoin Startup Lab, and we help people turn ideas into investment-worthy startups on Bitcoin. So I think it's sort of interesting to note that I was a naysayer in the beginning. My brother's like, hey, you got to buy Bitcoin. I said, that's a scam. That's a scam. Don't do it. Well, over 10 years later, I did eat my words. And so I'm relatively new to Bitcoin space, about 2 years now. And when we launched the first cohort of the pre-accelerator called Bitcoin Startup Lab, we had to just scrape the bottom of the barrel and bring together 25 teams. It was so difficult. Right? No Web3 investors want to invest back then. The graduating teams, they couldn't raise money at that time, right? And then a full 180, right? When Ordinals hit earlier this year, which in my opinion triggered the Bitcoin renaissance. And now it's we have more applicants than we can handle. Literally, it's too many to handle right now. It's just amazing time. So we're in the right place, right time. So we're the top pre-accelerator now on Bitcoin. And if any of you want to build something on Bitcoin, come find us. Thank you.
The Bitcoin Renaissance. I like it. And my name's Tyler Evans. I am one of the founders of BTC Inc., so publisher of Bitcoin Magazine, and we host the Bitcoin conference every year. I'm also the founding partner of our investment management arm called UTXO Management, where we run a couple funds on both the liquid and the venture side, focus really around the Bitcoin ecosystem, and get to meet with great founders and teams building inside Bitcoin. So to get us rolling here, I want to kind of open it up just to the panel in terms of, we've got some folks here today that represent teams actually building in Bitcoin. Kind of give us the lay of the land for what's the state of Bitcoin in the eyes of a builder, and what are some of the innovations or themes that you're excited about? And whoever wants to tee off with this one.
I can start. I think what's interesting about like Ordinals is you don't have to change anything about Bitcoin to get it to work. And I think that was a really important part of it and reason why it's been successful. As kind of the last panel was talking about, Bitcoin is very difficult to change. Like if that's a part of your proposal for what you're building, like good luck, it's not going to happen, right? So I think things that kind of can work within the structure of Bitcoin as it exists now, those are the things that will succeed, and those are the things that will actually be able to work.
I have a quick question for the audience. How many people can define what Ordinals is in here? Like, who can say, this is what Ordinals is? Okay, less than half. Well, okay, so Ordinals is actually a very simple and elegant protocol on top of Bitcoin. And you can define it in three things, basically. One is ordinal theory, which is what's an ordinal? What's an ordinal number? Well, ordinal is a way to uniquely identify every Bitcoin, or every Satoshi, the smallest unit of Bitcoin, just in this ordinal, like a sequential identification scheme. That's definition one, that's ordinal. Definition two is inscription. What's an inscription? It's just some data that you can write onto the Bitcoin blockchain. And that's just the data. It's not anything else besides, it's just data on a blockchain. It's actually just in a transaction, in the input of a transaction. So that's a definition two, inscription. Then definition three is actually an important one. It ties the inscription to the ordinal. Because the ordinal is Bitcoin. It's actually something you can own and transfer, and it's what the Bitcoin ledger is all about. It's about the ledger is basically tracking, using UTXOs, who owns what Bitcoin or how much Bitcoin you have in the ledger. And so the third definition of ordinal theory is defining who owns an inscription, right? You're pairing the ordinal, which is Bitcoin, with the inscription. So those are the three definitions that define the Ordinals protocol. And that's something that's native, actually, because it's around UTXOs, it's native to Bitcoin. It's really native to any UTXO chain. So on the other UTXO chains, you can also define an Ordinals protocol. And that's it. It's simple. It's quite elegant. I just described it. The implementation is a little more complicated. And we're at release 0.8.2. So we're not at a 1.0 release yet. And so just from these simple three definitions, you can actually do a lot. And that's why a bunch of people are really excited by Ordinals, and that we can build these things on top of Bitcoin that doesn't require changing Bitcoin.
Thanks. Was the question the state of Bitcoin right now, basically? Okay. Maybe it's best put like this: if Ethereum is the 13 states on the East Coast, really advanced, then Bitcoin is all that land going west. Most of the land is unclaimed, right? Unclaimed. Just sharing some numbers with you, I think the largest DeFi product on Bitcoin is around $50 million. And if you scrape together all the DeFi, I think it's a couple hundred million. In comparison, Ethereum is what, 40, 50 billion TVL? So do the math there. That's how much room you have to grow and more. Another thing to point out about the current state, you could look at some charts and you might be able to pull together maybe 200 companies building on decentralized application of Bitcoin. But the reality is probably 99 of those don't even have product market fit, right? Whereas you have thousands and thousands of dApps on Ethereum, right? So when Ethereum was at roughly like 100 dApps running on it, maybe the price was $30, $50. Bitcoin is at what, 26, 27,000-ish, with less than 100 dApps. And if you're talking about product market fit dApps, it's like 10, maybe. So imagine the growth there, right? So earlier people were saying, can it get to 10 trillion? Well, hey, I mean, when Ethereum was at 100 dApps, it's like $30. What is it now? 1,700, 1,800. If you do a multiple of that, it's going to go way over 10 trillion in the next cycle, right? And I feel like it's going to be a lot faster. If Ethereum took, 5 or 6 years to do it, well, there's a lot more people who understand blockchain technology, smart contracts. A lot more people understand like what business models or what tokenomics can work now and what don't work. So if it was 6 years before, maybe it's 3 years now, or maybe even faster, right? It's mind-boggling just to think about it.
Albert, you mentioned Ordinals has kind of kicked off a Bitcoin renaissance, and Danny, thank you for the definition for everyone. I'm curious to hear this panel's opinions. Why Ordinals, the concept isn't necessarily a new one to Bitcoin. We had colored coins, we had Mastercoin, we had Omni, we had kind of all these early 2013, 2014, 2015 innovations on Bitcoin, trying to do a lot of the same things in terms of data storage, asset issuance, tokenization. What's different about Ordinals, and why has it gotten traction and buy-in from the community in a way that's totally different than what's come before on Bitcoin?
I think some of it is just kind of like right place, right time. Like, like in a way, I think like Ordinals were sort of like discovered, not created. Like I think it is kind of an intrinsic property of Bitcoin that just wasn't really effectively being like packaged or understood. Like, I think it's like Jonathan Lau, I can't remember his name, in the Bitcoin Talk Forum back in 2012, essentially proposed an algorithm that was exactly Ordinals. But he just didn't build it out. He didn't like go develop it, and didn't like make good documentation, et cetera, et cetera. It just sort of like was a blip and went. Casey spent like over a year developing Ordinals full-time on his own, completely open source, focusing a lot on documentation, trying to get people to care. A lot of people don't sustain that on their own, just trying to get people to care about their project for that long. A lot of people also do, right? But I think some of it is just like, right place, right time, an idea coming about at a time when people are like ready to receive it. Obviously, just Ordinals on their own, I don't know that would have blown up, because as Danny was saying, like, there's kind of this base layer of like ordinal theory, which is just in individual Satoshis, identifying individual Satoshis on Bitcoin. And you can kind of say like, this Satoshi is special, or this one is common, or whatever. That wasn't the thing that caught on. It was inscriptions, right? Like, Ordinals allow you to reference to inscriptions which happen in a transaction. And I think the reason why inscriptions blew up is just because all of a sudden people were seeing giant transactions in the mempool, and they were like, what is going on? Why are there all these monkey JPEGs in my mempool? And so I don't know, I think it's like a combination of many things coming together, and sort of just like careful design and a long amount of development and careful kind of documentation. So I don't know. I think maybe like some of those other ideas could have caught on, but maybe it just wasn't like the time for them.
Yeah, and NFTs took some time to also develop. So we saw it on Ethereum. Ethereum had NFTs the last 2 years, or actually Ethereum had NFTs for a number of years, but it was really the last 2 years that it really caught on, right? And actually many of the Ordinals people came from both Ethereum NFTs and Solana NFTs. Actually, a large percentage of them. Actually, more of new people to Bitcoin than Bitcoiners who are excited about Ordinals at this point in time. But yes, it's just kind of market developed. So the Ethereum NFT market is a lot more mature than the Ordinal market. They are also different. NFTs are actually a broad, there are different types of NFTs. And the Ordinal protocol actually is a protocol for digital artifacts, which is also something, it's a subset of kind of the broad spectrum of NFTs. So you can think of digital artifacts as it's like your on-chain NFT, or maybe if you think of it in terms of like, not from the NFT side, it's like the digital version of a physical artifact. And so it has a few properties, namely so you can say a digital artifact is ownable. That's something that everyone cares about in NFTs. Complete, that's a new thing or a subset of NFTs, as in complete as in everything about that NFT. It's on the chain. It's basically on the native chain that the NFT is on. It's permissionless, it's uncensorable, and it is immutable, right? These are 5 properties of digital artifacts, and each one is quite important for Ordinals and for this particular protocol, that you don't have on Ethereum or Solana in the native protocol. So it is a unique set of features that actually, and people might understand this better who are coming new to maybe NFTs for first time. It's like a physical artifact, except it's even better than a physical art in one sense, as digital, and also it's immutable, as in you can't actually change it at all, right? If I gave David a sculpture, he owns it. He has all those like great projects of this physical ownership of this thing, but he could, use a Sharpie and write on it or like carve on it, right? So he has changed it, and you can't do that with a digital artifact. I guess you could burn it. That's kind of the only thing you can do.
I have a question. So talking about building on Bitcoin, right? So we built security sharing protocol. So the first protocol we built is called timestamping protocol. So there we didn't use Taproot, we used OP return. And much of our engineering effort was actually to minimize the block space, okay? To minimize the block space. We're using aggregate signature, and we get it down to like each timestamp is like 92 OP return, which is 96 bytes, I think. Now, when we saw Ordinals coming, so whoa, so Ordinals is maximizing the block space. So from an engineer's point of view, it's a bit odd because engineering is about efficiency. It's about minimizing something. So I just thought I'll get my fellow panelists here to shed some light for the nerdy engineer here, why maximizing is more important than minimizing.
You would love the Ordinals on this regard. So actually, on-chain monkey, so I was the first one to inscribe 10,000 monkey images on Bitcoin. So I did this in inscription 2021-9. And so there are 10,000 pictures of these monkeys, each unique. And how much space did I use? I used less than 20,000 bytes for all 10,000 images. So that's less than 2 bytes per image, right? And the way that was possible because I didn't inscribe individual JPEGs on there. I inscribed a code, a generator, that generated 10,000 unique images, right? And the code was also very succinct or small, and they used SVGs in the image format when you viewed it. So this idea of recursive inscriptions is something that's actually quite powerful in Ordinals, which is you can write code, then other inscriptions can call that code to do new things, right? So then you actually have, the proper term is composability. So you actually have inscriptions that are composable. And so that actually saves a lot of space. And that is kind of the way the industry is going, and using recursion to actually be very efficient in how you use the blockchain. And the free market works, right? The free market incentivizes everyone to save space, to do the maximum or best thing in the smallest amount of space. So those incentives do align. It's just, initially, some of it was using up a lot of space for the throw or the marketing aspect of it, I think, and that, like Udi with Taproot Wizards said they broke, Bitcoin with a 4 megabyte block, right? It's good publicity. It helped in the beginning of it, but then the fee market kind of incentivized everyone to maximize or optimize their inscriptions.
Yeah, because our timestamping protocol was actually running for like the past 1 year. And last year it was costing us about 20K a year. And then suddenly, when Ordinals showed up, it was up to $500,000. And, we are a small startup. We are a small startup. If we spend all our startup money running this timestamping testnet. So thanks a lot, guys. Now I know who these guys are.
That's a great point. In terms of to keep digging on Ordinals for a minute, it's like what you talked a little bit about timestamping. What are the things that people are doing with Ordinals besides just monkey JPEGs?
I mean, I personally love the art use case the most. I'm always like a little bit wary of like the word utility in the NFT space. I think I don't know, sometimes this can be like a marketing thing that people use that sort of doesn't make sense. Like, I personally think like the Bitcoin Renaissance, like art and culture narrative is like a huge thing in and of itself, right? Like art and culture have been around as long as money, longer than money, right? And I think, kind of going back to your question about like efficient use of block space or not, like sometimes art is about flexing. Like that is kind of sometimes what people want to do, right? They want to make a statement with what they're doing, and they want to use that space to show that they can do it, or to draw attention to the thing that they're doing. So like, but then of course, like Danny's answer about recursion and kind of the ways that you can be smart as an artist, like, you know, I think inscriptions are, in my opinion, a new art form. Like, you know, you have Bitcoin as a canvas, you kind of have the constraints of what you can actually put on the Bitcoin blockchain, you have the size constraints, and so you kind of have to be like technically clever, I think, to optimize your art to look good without taking up a huge amount of space, unless of course that's like what you're going for and you want to like make that statement. So, you know, maybe you guys can talk more about like applications, but to me, art and culture is where it's at, and it was sorely missing in Bitcoin culture.
Yeah, I think art is a great use case for us. I mean, Bitcoin is a medium for art, so that's one clear use case. But the thing about inscriptions, right? Inscriptions can be code, and as code, then code is basically what you run. So actually, every inscription that's code is really an app, and then that basically it's basically your app where you can publish applications, and these properties I mentioned about being a digital artifact. It's where you could, if it's code, then the code can be reused, and it's almost like a decentralized GitHub plus application platform, which potentially could be very powerful. It's still early days of this, and the way that Ordinals was designed was that inscriptions it's a MIME type, so browsers that are kind of ordinal aware can just open up an inscription, and then it basically is a web page that you can view, or within your web browser you can view it. So you could do all sorts of web-based applications on Ordinals. So that's, I think, one direction people are taking it in terms of applications, but also it's a place where you can store, because Bitcoin is Bitcoin. It's a very expensive chain. And a very secure chain. Actually, security is the main, like, I think, selling point, security and store value. People who have very high value digital assets, they probably want to store it on Bitcoin over other chains. Like if you have a very high value NFT, would you want it to be on Polygon or on Bitcoin if you had the choice? Right, it would be on Bitcoin. So on the high end of NFTs, you probably want them to be stored on Bitcoin and use Bitcoin security network to basically keep it there.
Good point. Yeah, if you look at Ordinals as sort of like an immutable database with programmability, I mean, could it be the beginnings of a metaverse where the land ownership is stored on Ordinals? Or could it be the beginnings of real property ownership, right? Fractionalization of property through blockchain. Some of our teams are experimenting with different things. Some of them are using it as a contract, right? For example, in financial markets, you have options. So you could transfer the option to another person, transfer the ordinal to another person, right? But this is just less than 1% of what could be unlocked with this tool. So it's amazing time right now for Bitcoin.
By the way, I really like this Erin's point that artists like to flex. So engineers like to optimize.
Absolutely.
Artists like to flex.
Well, David, I want to have you kick off with this one, but kind of moving on from Ordinals a little bit. The last panel talked about how there's been this chasm growing between Bitcoin and really the locked liquidity, the user base, and the rest of the crypto ecosystem. And it does really disappoint me that we're here how many years later and wrapped BTC with BitGo is the best market solution, the most widely adopted solution we have to bridge that gap. Can we do better?
Yeah, so the bridging technology between Bitcoin and the rest of the world is basically limited by the lack of smart contract on Bitcoin. So there has been proposals, actually. There's a proposal called Drive Chain, and it has been going on from 2015, I think that was the start point. Mm-hmm. So Erin was talking about sort of, you should never design a project assuming a certain...
That's my advice.
BIP 300 or 301 being passed. Even simpler things like there's a concept called covenants, which is actually very useful. Also proposed in about 2016-17 time frame. Still not passed. So it's just rather difficult with these limitations to do a full-scale bridging. So that's why when I talk about this Bitcoin staking protocol, is basically saying that, hey, liquidity is really difficult, but as a step, we can still do some DeFi staking, which is not requiring full-scale liquidity, not requiring the full bridging, but yet can still do it in trustless way. So basically the problem is that Bitcoin holders are very conservative. And even if you can have the best bridging technology, the security is still limited by the weaker of the two chains that you're bridging. And Bitcoin is the strongest secure chain, so any other chain is weaker. So I think that is the problem. One of the problems, I think.
I guess sort of to add to that on maybe like on a cultural level, I think a lot of, as you said, Bitcoiners are often very conservative. I like self-identify as a Bitcoin maxi, so I definitely lean in that direction more than like the move fast and break things direction. But I think like both of those perspectives are useful, right? And I think unfortunately a lot of the move fast and break things types went to crypto, right? And they left Bitcoin. And so people who want to build, they want to make things, they didn't stay on Bitcoin. I think what's nice is like now, as Albert said, like Ordinals is kind of bringing some of those people back to Bitcoin. And I think, I think a healthy ecosystem has both of those people and that they're balancing each other. And I think you're right that in recent years, Bitcoin has leaned more in the conservative side and not had as much of like the open building culture. Like, I think that some of that, like the experimentation and trying new things, like you're not going to be able to arrive at the perfect technology or the perfect solution just through like thinking and theory alone. You have to test things out. And I appreciate that perspective from like the more like builder crypto ecosystem, and I'm happy to see some of that coming back to Bitcoin now because I think Bitcoin needs it.
David, in terms of you mentioned BIP 300, which has been something that's been proposed for a while. I will say, from my perspective, it's something I think is actually starting to get more momentum and more consensus within the Bitcoin community, thanks in a large part to Ordinals driving up fees on the base chain. Do you think that Bitcoin, as a conservative, as a hard to change by design, as a slow-moving protocol, do you think it's making the right design choices there, or would you like to see faster experimentation or different implementations?
No. I think the highest value of Bitcoin is security. So I'm not a fan of go fast on Bitcoin. So in fact, actually, I've been collaborating with some Bitcoin developers like Robin Linus, who is a ZeroThink. And he was telling me that, in fact, Nakamoto, when he first came out with the scripting language, originally there was actually a list of many opcodes. And he ended up deleting a bunch of them because there was a bug in one of them, or at least one of them. So I think that's sort of the philosophy behind Bitcoin, that security is the number one thing. That's the highest value of Bitcoin.
Agreed. Security and the the consensus rules of the system being immutable and untouchable is a big part of what gives me confidence for Bitcoin's longevity. But do you think, besides with maintaining that prioritization in terms of security, would you like to see more change within Bitcoin at the protocol or at the soft fork level, or do you think we're at a place where the applications and the experimentation can all be done with the tool set we have within Bitcoin right now?
Yeah, I don't know whether all can be done. However, I think a lot can be done. Actually, the talk I gave earlier, the Bitcoin staking protocol, I think, give an example that within the scripting language, if you add some cryptography appropriately, externally, not internally, you can actually do quite a bit of stuff. And I think there are other innovations like discrete log contracts along similar lines. So I think there's still a lot of room to do. We just need more talented developers to work on these problems.
Yeah, I agree with that. Even with ordinal inscriptions, you did a lot more because now you're writing code and people are caring about the code that's going on to Bitcoin. So it's, yeah, basically we're training developers who can actually now develop on Bitcoin. And before it was very hard. Yeah, because of the limited things you could do. And then Ethereum came and said, oh, you could do all these things, right? Because, Solidity is actually relatively easy to program. So with inscriptions, actually, like for art or for simple apps, it's all JavaScript. You just have to know how to do JavaScript to do, because it's all browser based. And so you try a lot of new people who are and then they learn about Bitcoin. They read the white paper. They learn about UTXO, which is also a new concept, and that's what I think. What Albert's saying about the Bitcoin renaissance, just a new wave of people learning about Bitcoin for the first time.
And Albert, how about in terms of the startups going through the Bitcoin Startup Lab program, what are some of the creative things or ways you see teams within the program using Bitcoin today? What are some examples of exciting things you see being built right now?
Well, that's a big question. Let me just give a few examples. Our last cohort, our previous cohort, one of them they're building their first DEX on L1 Bitcoin. Another one created the first DLC APIs, so you can basically enable a DeFi ecosystem on Bitcoin L1. Right? In a day, you can start experimenting. And they empowered also another first to market was the first Ordinals lending protocol. So now you could use your Ordinals as collateral and then get Bitcoin back. Right? And then now you can also lend out your Bitcoin and get native Bitcoin yield back. Right? Those are from the last cohort, some of them from the last cohort. This cohort the last cohort was before Ordinals, right? And now after Ordinals, there's been like an explosion of creative energy and talent from other chains. Like this is the first time ever where I'm looking at the applications, go through an interview. Oh yeah, we just closed down our Ethereum project and we're coming to Bitcoin to build now. We just left Polygon, coming to Bitcoin to build now, right? And to your point, you mentioned ZK. And we're going to have one of the teams building a ZK rollup, right? Protocol on top of Bitcoin. So there's this, I think there's like a few ways to look at it. One is people come and their framework is what has worked on Ethereum and what can be done better on Bitcoin. Sort of like hindsight being 2020, we know the same JPEG inscribed on Bitcoin is worth a lot more now. They're using that same logic on other types of things that have worked on Ethereum and what can be brought to Bitcoin. But then I think going beyond that, a lot of people believe in the Bitcoin ethos, right? And if we think of Bitcoin as a tool to create a alternative and decentralized financial ecosystem, right, to keep the powers that be honest, well then the sky's the limit. Most of that, 99.99% of that hasn't been built yet, but we'll see the beginnings of that. Right, and the foundation of that is being built from the first two cores. So moving forward, I do expect to see a lot more innovation around building that infrastructure for a completely alternative financial ecosystem. And I think the work that Professor David at Babylon doing is super important to that. Yeah. Thanks.
The simplicity of Bitcoin is also a feature. I mean, that's why it's more secure, right? Ethereum is actually very complex, and the attack surface is much bigger for anything you do on Ethereum. While Bitcoin, it is limited to a much smaller instruction set, and there's actually one feature that's also actually quite powerful too. So PSBTs, partially signed Bitcoin transactions, is actually a very it's becoming an important thing in Ordinals. And I think when people learn about what you can do with PSBT, that'll also become a powerful tool. And it's a very relatively simple tool. And as a user too, it's simple on the security side to just see, the inputs and outputs, how your money is spent. While on let's say on the smart contract Ethereum side, it's actually very complex to actually understand if there's any attack in anything you sign. But on a PSBT, you can actually just look at the transaction and understand where the money is coming from and going to. It's actually quite clear.
One place where we're starting to see a lot more teams building a lot of innovation is really on the layer 2 level for Bitcoin with alternative approaches, smart contract, EVM implementations as layer 2s, other messaging or smart contract protocols. I'm curious for our panel, what do you guys think is the next or up and coming or most exciting layer or innovation on Bitcoin that you're watching?
Obviously, I'm going to say Ordinals.
well, how about what's coming in the Ordinals ecosystem?
I mean, just sort of specifically, I kind of as I've said, I kind of go the art and culture route. I think, there's some really fun features for artists coming out. So provenance is one that's been widely waited for a while, which is just, the ability to show ownership, essentially, to have, this is the parent of this child. So far, there's not a way to do that with Ordinals. You kind of just have to trust, which is not a great thing. So, I think, and not only that, but it's kind of the way that it's designed is pretty interesting technically. I think recursion, which came out maybe a month or two ago, which is what Danny was talking about with being able to reference past inscriptions with code. These kind of things I think, just like Albert's talking about bringing people in to build sort of maybe the more engineering, technical, financial services stuff. I think that there's this artistic perspective that's still yet to be unlocked within Ordinals and inscriptions. And I think if we can get digital artists to understand the technical side of it and really learn a little bit about Bitcoin in the process, ideally, I think that there's a lot of really, really cool art projects that are just sort of starting to emerge. I think OCM is an example. What you guys are doing, it's both technical and artistic, and kind of combining those things. And I think that's what I'm excited to see, and I think we'll continue to see more of as these new features roll out on Ordinals.
I think wallets also. I mean, the wallet software there are almost no wallets that support Ordinals right now, and also in general, just UX and UI, it's just really hard for anyone to let alone a non-technical person to enter the space now. So, there's a lot of opportunity to building basically a better user experience for regular people to onboard.
So we talk about layer 2, right? So layer 2, one way of layer 2 can mean different things to different people. Sure. But one interpretation of layer 2 is that it inherits or shares the security of Bitcoin as layer 1. And so I think this notion of sharing security actually has been around. Again, one of these things has been around since Nakamoto. He proposed the first shared security solution, which is merge mining. Mm-hmm. Merge mining. So someone mentioned Color Coin. So Color Coin, I think, is one of the first merge mine chains with Bitcoin. So, but merge mining, I think, has several issues with merge mining. So I think with sort of the stuff that we're doing, more shared security, different shared security methods, I think that would also help to promote the layer 2 ecosystem. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a really interesting thing is when you guys launched at mainnet around the Bitcoin halving, all those opportunities that could be built on top of that on Babylon. That's definitely right around the corner, right? And of course, the work that Erin's doing at the Open Ordinals Institute. But the next upgrade has provenance and some other upgrades. That's around the corner, and that's going to open up an entirely whole universe of ideas and opportunities. I think on L1 is not crowded yet. So if we really want to, say, create a DeFi full-blown DeFi ecosystem on L1 Bitcoin. Perhaps maybe stable coins. People are experimenting with that. You also need lending and borrowing, like lending protocols, and then obviously DEXs, right? So those are all in the experimentation phases right now. So the sky's the limit. Right? Once that gets crowded, then yeah, I think L2s will just explode. Yeah.
Great. Well, we've got 5 minutes left, but I wanted to save a little time to open it up for questions for the panel. So let's jump into them. Go ahead.
What do you guys think about the security on Ordinals? Because a lot of people are jumping into Bitcoin, they're going to do a lot of stuff, but how are we going to make sure users' funds are safe?
The question was about the security of Ordinals with new people coming to the Bitcoin chain to use them. How do we make sure users' funds are safe?
The security is the same security as Bitcoin, but I think you're talking about in terms of Ordinals because it's a layer. You could say it's invisible to the normal Bitcoin wallet, right? That type of security. So yeah, there's the Ordinals wallets are still a little bit behind. I mean, there's only a couple of them, but it's only been a few months that they've been working on it, so it needs some time. I mean, like Ledger support is not really there yet. Experts just integrate Ledger, but Ledger itself doesn't see the Ordinals. But in terms of the actual underlying security, it's the same as Bitcoin security. It's just more of a user interface issue right now because the wallets don't recognize Ordinals. They recognize Bitcoin, but Ordinals are just Bitcoin.
Yeah, I guess, I agree with what Danny said, and I think, you need a wallet that's like Ordinals aware, essentially, which Ord, the base protocol does have a wallet that's Ordinals aware, and then there's kind of more. It's not like a great user interface. You kind of have to be comfortable with the command line and that kind of thing to use it. But yeah, there are wallets being built. I think as you said, that's kind of where having a really smooth user interface where people feel comfortable, and the wallet itself is Ordinals aware and is not going to accidentally spend your Ordinals as a fee to the miner. That's very, very important. But I think we're in good shape and kind of building that. Yeah.
So Nakamoto protected Bitcoin from double spending, right? So we offer the same protection to Ordinals. You can't double spend Ordinals either. Good.
And we might be able to stake them using.
Stake your Ordinals. coming soon. Let's go up here. Go ahead.
The short answer is yes. I think one of the biggest opportunities is for people from the Ethereum space to come to Bitcoin and build. There's a massive, massive knowledge arbitrage, right? Bitcoin has been more or less stagnant for the last few years. But if you're building on Ethereum, right, you're building those concepts, those mental frameworks on tokenomics, what does cryptography unlock? What are the new network effects that are so powerful that they rip users away from Web 2, right, into Web 3 business models. Right? If you take that knowledge and re-envision it with a blank slate on Bitcoin, that is a disruptive factor. Right? And I think within the next 6 months, we're already beginning to see this, as I mentioned, with our current cohort, but in coming months, 6 months to 12 months, it's going to be a deluge of people coming from other chains onto Bitcoin. Right? And I don't want to be too blunt, but I think it'll be a very rude awakening for the people who haven't really been innovating on Bitcoin. Yeah.
All right, we've got time for one more. Go for it, Nick.
I feel like a bit of a stooge. Can one of you or all of you talk about rare sats and Block 9?
What do you want to know? The alpha. I mean, I guess just to explain, so Casey kind of came up with this rarity scheme, that the rare sats, which is based on the supply in Bitcoin, right? So an uncommon sat is the first sat in every block. Rare is the first after a difficulty adjustment, whatever. You kind of go up, and it's very Bitcoin intrinsic. But that's just subjective from his perspective, what he thought was interesting. Like block 9 sats, those are very old sats. Block 9 was the first block that is outside of Satoshi's wallet. I believe that's true. So like you can't get sats older than block 9. So like that's what are called exotic sats, where, you know, they're important for whatever reason. Maybe you want a sat that was mined on your birthday, or maybe you want a sat that was part of the Bitcoin pizza transaction. Like there's lots of different ways that people can kind of, you know, get really degen with it and find something important out of it. So yeah, that's my alpha on those two.
Anyone else? Maybe one more. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask Danny's opinion about the rare sats and about, you know, maybe the usage of block 9, because in my perspective, you know, you've got the tech, you've got the art, all of these things that Ordinals is bringing to the Bitcoin ecosystem. But I think that more and more layers add more value to these different collections. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, Danny.
So Ordinals works because Bitcoin's a UTXO model. So it's actually very intrinsic to, or is native to Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is a UTXO model. You could always track Bitcoin by UTXOs, right? So even though the protocol is about a Bitcoin is a Bitcoin, it's fungible, but you can, it's a directed graph that you can go back in time to see where that particular UTXO or Bitcoin came from. If you believe in this first in, first out model, which is around, you know, Ordinals theory is first in, first out. That's that one way to interpret. So if you believe in that, then you can go back to block 9, or you can start at block 9 and go forwards in time and see how it all gets spread around. So it's intrinsic to Bitcoin UTXO and then to Ordinal theory. And then if you want to, you know, let's say you choose Bitcoin as your medium for like high value digital assets or for art or whatnot, then there is some value to doing it on, let's say, block 9, because that is a more limited part or more rare type of material of the material of Bitcoin. Bitcoin really is kind of the expensive material because of the fee model, and everyone in the whole world has to share, you know, this limited block space. You know, basically, you know, 4 megabytes around every 10 minutes max for everything, including transactions, and then block 9 is kind of a subset of that. And I guess another property of block 9 is, so it was the block Satoshi mined. He sent 10 Bitcoin to Hal Finney back in like really early. It's the first Bitcoin transaction that wasn't a block reward, and then it was 10 Bitcoin, which in Satoshi is it's 1 billion exactly, which is actually like a good supply for fungible tokens. So basically you have like kind of a fungible token type of thing on top of Bitcoin. So I think as Ordinals gets bigger, people will appreciate that as like a more rarefied, I guess, set.
All right, let's give these guys a round of applause. Thanks, everyone.